Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh, Bahashem, Wakakadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the great millstone, preaching this word truthfully and sincerely. And shalom to the Akim, scattered through the four corners of the globe, preaching the word truthfully and sincerely. And shalom to the Akim, that be like unto the speckled bird, preaching the word truthfully and sincerely. And I say shalom to you Akim out there. And this is a sit-down lesson through the spirit, power, grace, and mercy of Yahweh Yahushua on August the 5th, 2022 at 12:22 p.m. Central Standard Time on this Friday afternoon. And this is a news article in the news for today on August the 5th, 2022 on this Friday afternoon. Friday noon, Salakia. And the highlight of this news article, and it reads, as you know, we've been seeing the tension that's been going on between the United States and China. You know, the tensions been at a critical point now more than ever, as tensions continues to rise between China and the United States over Taiwan, the South China Sea, and after a few days ago of Nancy Pelosi's visit, you know. And as China was building up their military, doing their full force military training, launching 12 missiles near the islands close to Taipei, as these tensions to continue to increase between China and the United States, as their relationships become more rockier than ever, And the highlight of this news article, and it reads, China cuts ties with U.S. on critical issues. Beijing has several communications with Washington in several areas in the retaliation for Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan. China has decided to cut diplomatic ties with the United States in a number of military and civilian areas, and the foreign minister announced on Friday. The development ties as Beijing ways of retaliating for this week's visit to Taiwan by Speaker of U.S. House Representative Nancy Pelosi. The minister released list of areas which there will no longer be communications between China and American officials. It includes military contacts on the level of theater, commander, and wide defense policies coordination talks. Also suspend rare constellation of maritime security cooperations on the respiration, if I pronounced that right, or illegal migration, legal assistance on criminal matters, fighting against transitional crimes and drug trafficking, and talks on climate change, according to the statement. Early on Friday, that Chinese minister announced personal sanctions on Pelosi and her immediate family members. Right, and I mentioned that as well too. It was in regard to the United States situation, and I was saying that that China or Beijing, they're going to use, either it's going to be military response or it's going to be through economic sanctions and such things like that. And I mentioned that. Now here you go. Now they cutting ties with United States. Now they sending economic sanctions measures on Nancy Pelosi and her affiliated families. And continuing on with the news article, it says early on Friday, Chinese foreign minister announced personal sanctions on Pelosi and her immediate family members. It says Pelosi visited Taiwan this week despite repeated accusations from Beijing. The self-governed island is claimed as part of China, where U.S. formally acknowledged the One China policy since 1970. Washington maintains former ties with Taipei, even as switching diplomatic record nations to Beijing over the past several years. Subsequently, subsequent American administrations have increasingly treated Taiwan's government and representation of sovereign nations. Beijing says Washington is deliberately undermining the status quo and encouraging separatists in Taiwan, with the White House trying to distinct itself from Pelosi, claiming it was her independent decision to visit Taiwan. Officials Beijing took as a part of a perceived policy to underline its claims and threatens consequences. Chinese People Liberation Army launched a major exercise around the islands, while China's media described as a rehearsal of a full blockage. Beijing also introduced trade restrictions on Taiwan. Right, because I seen that video. I seen it on YouTube on my desktop. I believe it was from TRT News, and they were showing like the like technology import and export between Taiwan and China. They had cut ties with them as well too. So they cut ties on limitations of import and export between China and Taipei, as far as the technology goes. And I believe Joe Biden signed that bill to be in more competition with China over the computer chips, manufacturing, technology goods as well too. So this definitely has a lot to do with cutting diplomatic ties with the United States and China, and then with Taipei and China as well too, with the financially goods, of economic goods, of especially the technology, computer chips, because China is the most advanced technology. They on top when it comes to the technology and stuff like that, because you have everything that's manufactured in China. So that's why the United States and China relationship is not so good. That's why China is cutting ties with the United States on a lot of different issues. So these tensions are going to increase now more than ever. So the tensions between the United States and China is going to increase, and they're going to continue to cut diplomatic ties from China. China is going to cut their communication ties with the United States, diplomatic ties, and others, military issues, policy issues, and other category of things, you name it. So that lets you know at this point right now, China doesn't want nothing to have with the United States. So they cut ties with them. So that's going to increase with the nations rising against nations and kingdom against kingdoms, and it's going to increase now more than ever. The world powers of China and the United States, the tension is going to increase now more than ever, after this major news right here of China cutting ties with the United States. Either has something to do with manufacturing goods, technology goods, or military diplomacies, or any other issues China used to have with the United States, or cooperation. So the cooperations between China and the United States, it's been cut off. They cut no more ties with one another, especially with the tensions increasing, over the Nancy Pelosi visit and protecting Taipei. Taipei is a self-governed island. Ever since 1949, I believe, they separated from them. They have their own island and stuff like that, because China and Beijing still look at China as one of them. It's still part of them. So the United States has got unofficial cooperations or alliances with Taipei, So that kind of angers, China and Beijing as well too. So that lets you know that China and the United States cut diplomatic ties from one another. So that might comes to the point when Beijing and Washington might cut some ties with one another as well too on certain issues or cooperations. So they're gonna cut ties potentially with them as well too, as the tensions increase now more than ever between China and the United States over Taipei. And I'm gonna bring out a scripture and close out the lesson. And I'm gonna go to verse 7. In regards to the United States and China cutting ties, diplomatic ties, and critical point ties from one another, as the tensions increase between the two different nations, and the different kingdoms as well too. Matthew 24:7 and verse 7. In the book of Matthew in the Holy Scriptures, and it reads, "For nation shall rise against nations, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and earthquakes in diverse places," right? Because this can be the nations clashing it out with one another. It could be in many different categories. It could be from a military, diplomatic tie standpoint. It could be from an economic standpoint, import, export, technology goods and manufacturing goods and everything. They can clash it out with each other on that. It could be from a political standpoint. It could be a human rights standpoint. And it can be many other categories as well too. So that's why in critical issues that China and the United States have cooperation with one another. Now they're cutting diplomatic ties from one another, So as the tensions to increase between China and the United States, now it's going to increase now more than ever, So yeah, expect to see more and more of the book of Matthew 24:7 that I just brought out, of these nations rising against nations and increasingly continue to hash it out. That tensions going to increase between these nations as well too. It's going to continue now more than ever, And other nations, not just only China and the United States, have their tensions rising at an all-time high. You're going to have tension between the other nations as well too. Because these nations rising against nations is definitely another increase between these nations as they hash it out in a lot of many issues, either it's regarding from a political standpoint, a human rights standpoint, military standpoint, economic standpoint, technology, and many other issues. So these nations are going to continue to increase of these things that's that I just named in those categories. So these things are going to increase now more than ever, with the nations rising up against other nations. Another nation going to rise up against another nations, and that tension is going to increase now more than ever, as we've seen it right before our eyes on an everyday basis, So with that, I hope this was edifying through the spirit, power, grace, and mercy of the Yahweh Yahushua. And first and foremost, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh, Hashem, Yahushua, Hashem, Wakakadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, preaching His word truthfully and sincerely. And shalom to the Akim, scattered to four corners of the globe, preaching the word truthfully and sincerely. And shalom to the Akim, that be like unto the speckled bird, preaching the word truthfully and sincerely. And until next time, I will say shalom and a ball.